A campaign speech or text is usually well planned. It is also persuading and it is objective driven. A campaign speech is well planned. It means that the speech has organization and unity of ideas. The prime examples of politicians that I know who deliver their speeches in a very formal way, in that traditional way of sticking to the outline or trying to be all the time organized for about the ideas that they say to the public are Barack Obama of the United States, and of course in our own setting it's former President Benigno Noynoy Aquino III. I could say that these politicians are really prepared. Now, in the previous years, we have seen politicians who deviate to this seeming to be standard way of delivering speeches. We have seen former President of the United States, Donald Trump, deliver his speeches in a way that is like talking to a friend. It is not concentrated in maintaining the rigid organization of the outline. He is talking about this one thing, but he will not concentrate on that very thing. He has the freedom, he has the style to deviate, to suddenly change topic. Surprisingly, many people find that style as crowd-pleasing and relatable. Similarly, in our own setting, we have President Rodrigo Duterte who uses that style in his speeches. If I may say, it is like the stream of consciousness in literature nila Anton Chekhov. Meron ka sabihin sa madla, and then suddenly you thought of something and then you simply say it. For me, medyo mahirap nang sundan yung topics niya sa kanyang mga speeches because he is discussing one thing and then suddenly he shifts his attention to another thing. Pero that is his style. That is his style of delivering the message. Delivered a lot of his campaign speeches with jokes. Napakaraming jokes and the audience were laughing, and it's really entertainment, if I may say. We can have polar opposites like the late Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago, whose speeches are very well organized, and we can have the current President Duterte, whose speeches are seemingly like a stream of consciousness. Kung ano yung maisip niya, yun yung sasalitain niya, yun yung sasabihan niya, and lalagyan niya ng mga jokes. Nevertheless, we cannot say that the one is more prepared than the other one. Campaign speeches requires the speaker to plan it beforehand. She could have written it herself, or he could have advisors who have written it for him, and then he will just simply be looking at it, and then bahala na siya kung ano estilo yung gagamitin niya sa pagde-deliver ng message. A campaign speech is meant to be persuasive. If you listen to a campaign speech of a certain politician, and if you happen to be there on that exact location where he is delivering his speech, if you observe closely, you will realize that the politician is exerting a lot of effort. He is using his mind and his skills to persuade. That is the main goal of a campaign speech. To persuade the audience, to persuade the people to vote for him and for his party. At this point, let's take a look at some persuasive techniques employed by our politicians in the last presidential elections 2016. So please listen to the audio of these recordings, and I'll be providing some explanations as well. Rewatching the campaign speeches of the presidential candidates in 2016, I observed that there's always an acknowledging of God. I think this is really persuasive, knowing the fact that Philippines is a bastion of Christianity in Asia, wherein predominantly 93% of our population, or 86.8 million Filipinos, are Christian. I can say that lahat ng presidential elections last 2016, they mention God and they acknowledge God. Kasi nga, predominantly, Philippines is a Christian country. Si Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago nga, in one of her speeches, and this was in a university, a private Catholic university, which is a University of Perpetual Help, she kind of started her speech, with a brief story of her asking help or asking a favor, praying to the Lady of Perpetual Help.
You know, when I left Manila this morning, it was lightly raining. And immediately my staff called me from the office and said, "Ma'am, there is a problem about our campus tour. It's lightly raining, it's drizzling, and the traffic is very heavy." So I said, "Do not worry. I will go. I have a secret. I will abolish these two obstacles. We will have light traffic and the rain will stop. I am going to pray to Our Lady of Perpetual Help."
Mga kababayan, hindi ako perpekto. Walang taong perpekto sa mundo. Pero ako ay may takot sa Diyos at ako ay may takot sa inyo. Na alam ko, pag hindi ko ginawa ang aking trabaho ng tama, mananagot ako sa Diyos at mananagot ako sa inyo.
Number 2, use of many adjectives and adverbs that could flatter. Napakadalas gumagamit ang mga politiko ng mga mabulaklak na mga salita para makakumbinsi. Ito nga yung mga uses of adjectives and adverbs, and iba pang mga flowery words.
Maraming salamat po! Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat! Talagang ramdam na ramdam po! Nagsanib puwersa na ang lahat ng tapat na nagmamahal sa Republika ng Pilipinas!
Another persuasion technique that politicians love is the emotional appeal. People can be related to with the use of emotions. When delivered well, the audience most of the time empathize with the experience of the speaker.
Iniwan sa simbahan ay makakarating dito sa harap ninyo. Sino ang mag-aalala na ang isang batang iniwan ay magkakaroon ng mga magulang na aalagaan siya, aalagaan at ibibigay ang pangangailangan upang may pagpatuloy kung anong nararapat at makatulong sa kanyang kapwa.
That is one of the most powerful, convincing technique that is utilized by many politicians. Yung mga makapagpakabagabag na mga salita, mga stories, if it's made up, then yun na yung yung pintas ng mga nag-iisip na tao, Pero if it's true, then it's okay, Another technique that a politician used in his campaign speeches is exaggerations and generalizations.
Religyoso, manggagawa, masasakan, magbibisa, mga kapakal, mga kapamagitan, mga kapatid nating Muslim, mga kaibigan ng Bicol, mga kapatid natin sa buong bansa. At iisa lang ang sinabi nila, si Jojo Binay ang boboto nila sa Mayo at 9.
Exaggeration and generalization are very common during campaign speeches. My tip for you is to be careful from these people who generalize and who exaggerates, because simply when one resorts to this, it is not true. Mahirap na sabihin na itong isang bagay na totoo dito ay totoo para sa lahat. That is really problematic and simply it's not true. The fifth technique is probably the oldest of all of this. mga pangako, na kadalasan napapako. Right? So, when you listen to a campaign speech, an election speech, you will always hear a lot of promises. But this example is from someone that I really admire.
At manalangin din ang mga nagdadakaw ng pera ng gobyerno. Dahil pag nagpresidente ako, lagot silang lahat. Ikukulong ko sila, every single one.
The next technique that is often seen with politicians during election campaigns is repetition.
Walang masama sa bago. Gusto natin ng bagong ligo, bagong saing, bagong bahay, bagong boyfriend, bagong cellphone, bagong bayan, bagong umaga, bagong Pilipinas.
The next technique in convincing people to vote for you is the populist appeal. This had been proven as effective in the campaigns of Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, and of course, Rodrigo Duterte, our current president. In this technique, the speaker highlights that he is on the side of the poor, that he is on the side of the many, and he is against those few who are rich and who are oppressing the majority of the population. In my opinion, this style promised a lot, and thus it had convinced a lot of people. And yes, this style made the current president to be the president of this country.
It's always obedience to the law is optional. Dito sa taas, ito yung mga korupsyon, tax exemption, walang bayad, walang areglo, without payment of import taxes. Ito yung mga mayaman na sinasabi, parang tingin nila sa Pilipinong bugok. Talaga yung tinag-intindi. Dito naman sa baba, dito yung mga tao na low life. Ito yung mga kidnapper, drugs, food rapper. Yan ang dalawa. Dalawa yan dito na optional to follow the law. Ang naiipit, talagang naiipit, yung ordinaryong tao na walang kilalang general, walang kilalang mayor, walang kilalang governor, o walang kilalang militar.
Why is this technique very effective? It is very effective because people want change. Somebody who will be fighting for us, who will be with us. However, in reality, we got to really be critical about people who gave this kind of promises. I think the judgment for the person who promised to be on the side of the people, to fight for the people, to prioritize the rights of the people and the safety of the people should be done in the end of the term of the leader. Only through that we can judge well whether he had delivered the promise or not. Another persuasive technique that I've seen in the 2016 presidential election is the telling of stories and jokes. Here's one from the late Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago.
Tanong, kung ang opposite ng pro ay con, ano naman ang opposite ng progress? Sagot, anong opposite ng progress? Sagot, Congress. Finally, tanong, lahat ba ng fairy tale nagsisimula sa once upon a time? Sagot, hindi. Ang iba ay nagsisimula sa kung iboto ninyo ako.
Number 9, personal pronouns. The use of personal pronouns are also all the time present in the campaign speech. Take a look at this. This one is from Mar Rojas. He said, noong nakaraang 2004, 2005 hanggang 2010, pinaglaban natin yung katiwalian, kinontra natin yung pagsisinungaling, yung pagnanakaw ng ating kababayan. Sa bawat yugto ng ating kasaysayan, mga Pilipino, ordinaryong Pilipino, mga mamamayan ng ating inang bayan, tumayo, nanindigan at pinaglaban ang ating bukas. You can see that the words natin, which is we, ating, which also denotes ours, all the time is used. So, laging may kasama yung speaker, and sinasama niya yung audience. Ilbis na aking, he will say natin. Ilbis na sabihin niya na ako, he says tayo. So, these personal pronouns make people, especially those easily believing people, to be convinced. Another persuasive technique that I've seen is knowledge in history and love for country appeal.
In 21, Magellan landed in the Philippines. We know that. Then he went down and said, I am the discoverer of these islands. Aba, putang ina niya. Who are you to discover my land? My great and great plus 10 great-grandfather was doing well. We were part of the Malay race, and maybe you had the form of government until you idiots came to my land to colonize it.
This technique is really effective. For me, I'm fond of hearing people who talks about history, but being critical, I have to ask myself, why is he talking about it? What is his purpose? There are many persuasive techniques that the politicians use during his campaign or her campaign speeches. I have noted anger over the previous government, quotations, appeal for good values, vivid descriptions or imageries, rhetorical questions, associations, and I would also like to mention facts and statistics, which many politicians fail to use during their speeches. Now, we come to the concluding part of this video lesson. Now, I'm going to ask again the question of the hour. How can we be critical when it comes to listening to election campaign speeches? Are we intelligent enough to determine the hidden objectives, the falsehoods, or the fallacies many politicians during their speeches? How can we determine truth? This would require us to think. Now, pwede nyo sabihin, ba't pa ako mag-iisip, sir? Boto na lang ako. But what's stake here is our future. If we get a bad leader, then who will suffer? I would like to say that being doubtful is something that is not bad. I think we have to be doubtful when we listen to campaign speeches. We can ask, is the information being provided by the speaker correct? Have I critically think before believing him or her? Is his character true and good? What would be his or her ideas' effect in my own setting? Does he simply utilize emotions, or he handsomely utilize evidences and good reasoning too? What are his good ideas? What are the fallacies in his reasonings? Does he or she control the media? Where does he really came from? Is he from the people, the masses, or did he really stood for the people? What are his or her real platforms? what are his or her step-by-step solutions to the country's problems? Is this only for show? These are the things that we can ask whenever we listen to campaign speeches of a politician. Now, what kind of leader do our country, Philippines, need? I agree with Ernesto G. Banaois. He said that the next leader of the Philippines, particularly the president, he or she should be a brilliant economic architect. He or she should be a wizened diplomat, an upholder of national interests and territorial sovereignty. He should or she should also be a promoter of values of integrity, respect, and discipline, a remover of corruption, and an advocate of moral regeneration.